I've learned a massive amount about the game's combat since day one. I learned that the running and downstrike attacks on the Architect Crest can both be charged, and the bind on the Shaman Crest has a height limit when performing it in the air, and binding from too high up will cancel the bind animation without refunding your silk. Don't do this. And now that I've spent the time with the game that I have, doing all the endings, and even a couple productive splunking expeditions into the data mines, I have never been more confident in my life when I say making this a ranking video would have been a massive oversight. No matter what I put at the bottom, I just feel like people are gonna get mad. Like, it's that close of a race. So instead of lining them up for their final judgment like I usually would, I'm dragging all 7 crests against their will right into my completely ethical testing laboratory, and I'm just gonna dissect the hell out of them, info dump on everyone, and then rate them all individually so everyone can be happy. And a couple of y'all will probably bitch about that too, so let's just go on ahead and get started. Silksong shares the same basic melee attack scaling as Hollow Knight, where the starting needle does 5 base damage, and then going up by increments of 4 until you reach the level 5 needle, which deals 21 base damage. Some of the damage values change from enemy to enemy, similar to how the Husk Guards in City of Tears would get a small HP boost when you got your first nail upgrade, but Silksong handles it a bit differently. It seems like it has to do more with certain enemies just taking less damage from whatever you throw at them. This is convoluted enough to lead into a whole other video topic that I do have planned because this happens with quite a few enemies, but it's not too relevant for what we're diving into now. I'm only bringing this up because there are certain crests that adjust attack speed like the Wanderer and Reaper crests, but don't have inversely proportional damage output like you would see in most games. The Wanderer still does 5, and the Reaper still does 5. If you have the basic level 1 nail, you're gonna do 5 damage no matter what. The first thing you'll notice immediately is that each crest can change Hornet's base moveset, her running attack, and most importantly, her downstrike. But they also come with their own array of tool and skill slots. The Architect Crest, for instance, has no space for silk skills, but it's the only crest that lets you equip 3 red tools, lending itself to minion and bullet hell builds. But even stopping the explanation there is still a very undercooked description of what each crest can actually do. And I think my first hint on this system being way deeper than I thought it was when I was using the Wanderer crest and occasionally saw this flash of light when I hit something, and I was like, that doesn't look normal. I should probably see what that is. Every crest has this implicit passive bonus that the game seldom does a good job explaining, and in some cases the game just deadass just doesn't even tell you it's there. So I'm gonna crack these bitches open so we can all see what's inside. I'll be reviewing each crest based on 3 core tenets: build flexibility, the passive bonus, and the moveset handling. I wish I could give you numbers for the unupgraded Hunter's Crest, but as to be expected, there isn't any. No special abilities, no hidden talents or situational buffs. It's the basic vanilla moveset that everyone starts with, so I'm just gonna move on to explaining the passive ability of the +1 crest you can obtain by using the Needlein at this gate here in Moss Grotto, and then snagging the upgrade from the NPC inside Weaver Nest Atla. This gives you a melee damage bonus upon successive attacks. It can boost your damage in 2 separate stages, hitting around 25% once you've landed 6 to 7 hits without taking damage, and then further up to 40% once you've maxed it out at 12 hits. So like, just think like Millicent's Prosthesis, but instead of being hyper aggressive, you just play very, very carefully and don't get hit. The crest keeps track of where you're at in the sequence with this Devil May Cry ass exceed gauge looking display thing, whatever the hell. And I'm not sure if these stacks ever wear off unless you're fast traveling or sitting at a bench. I couldn't find anything that looked like a decay mechanic, so I just started capturing and literally walked away from my PC and like got food, and when I came back I still had all my stacks, so I'm pretty sure you can only reset this by fast traveling, resting, or, you know, just getting smacked by something. On paper, this passive bonus sounds amazing, and a 40% damage boost to needle attacks is one of the most significant bonuses given by any crest, but you do have to get really, really good at just not taking damage for it to actually be pulling good weight. It only affects needle attacks, so structuring your tool loadout in a way that also favors needle attacks is probably the best way to use this crest. You've got an okay selection of blues and yellows to pick from. Pin Badge and Long Claw seem like the 2 obvious top shelf options, and you could have the dice on a yellow spot for the occasional damage negation. Maybe throw in Warding Bell on the Vesta Crest and use it as an oh shit button so you don't take damage, and then maybe just combo that into Claw Mirrors or something. But as for the reds, since you're speccing into needle attacks, the only 2 you really have to choose from are the Orange Juice and the Flint Slate, so that's almost always what you'll want to be running if you're building like as optimally as possible. I like having Threadstorm as my skill just because of how good it is at opening up space and shoving smaller dudes off of you, but I'm not really using it as a consistent damage source since the only damage being boosted boosted by the passive is just direct needle hits. Even with all the zoning tools you can pack into a single build, it's still hard as shit maintaining the boost long enough for it to be effective. Especially during Act 3, where every third or fourth enemy just has a nuclear amount of HP, but if we do ever get a Godhome equivalent DLC, then this crest is probably going to be the snap pick. The moveset is no different from the basic Hunter crest, which is kind of disappointing because I feel like that's the one thing it's missing that would have made it more interesting. The charged attack is just 2 heavy swipes that only barely outrange its basic attack, but most other crests give Hornet a specific charged attack with some kind of proficiency to it. Like the Architect crest gives you a really powerful multi-hit that covers a large area, or the charged attack on the Wanderer crest being a 5-hit stab attack. It's not the best charged attack in the game, but when fully upgraded, it ends up falling in the middle of the 7 damage-wise. The downstrike is easy enough to maneuver once you get used to spacing it out, even if you occasionally whiff a hit that absolutely looked like it shouldn't have. I wouldn't personally recommend it for platforming since the diagonal needs to be a bit more precise than something like Witch or Reaper, but the moveset is a classic, and the all-in-one high-top bootstrapper of a passive buff on the upgraded variant makes it pretty hard to criticize. This crest hard carried my ass and many others through the first half of the game because of how good its passive is. I was hanging on to this shit well into the Citadel and even after I found some of the game's specialty crests, and the only force powerful enough to pull me away from it was a long drawn-out love affair with the Witch. The passive effect carries this crest hard. I would dare say it's the only thing good about it. After binding, each needle hit generates between 1 to 3 silk cores that restore 1/2 a notch of silk. The effect persists for 10 seconds, and this is in addition to the silk you're already restoring just through basic combat. And just a few good whacks with the basic attack can be enough to have another bind ready to go before the effect even expires. The basic attack is the slowest of any of the 7. The charged attack is unremarkable as sawdust and also one of the weaker ones damage-wise. It's my least favorite moveset by a tremendous margin, but the passive is so insane on it that I just never gave a shit. The first utility you notice with it is how easy it is to just keep a heal ready in the early game. But once you spend enough time with it and start discovering more tools and thinking of fun builds to test out, the extra silk regen only gets that much better. It facilitates healing gimmick builds like claw mirrors and injector band, and you can throw in multi-binder if you have the Vesti crest unlocked, so the mirrors AoE procs twice. Even red tools give you a few good options because you have a lot of reds that expend silk upon use, like the 3 silk shot variants and the snare setter, which is the single highest damage tool you ever receive, and it's not even close. The injector band is good here. Reserve bind and spool extender are both great. Just like any silk related tool you can find will probably have some kind of synergy with Reaper, and is more than enough for me to overlook its clunky and honestly kind of boring moveset. Like, brother, what even is this charged attack? Isn't this supposed to be like a scythe? Like, fist weapons in DS3 had more reach than this bullshit. The moveset also doesn't consist of any multi-hit options, which would have fit nicely with its passive effect in my opinion, but the amount of silk you're getting per hit already feels powerful enough, so I don't know. Maybe they did have multi-hit attacks on it at some point and then just decided, okay, this shit is way too strong. We need to do something about this. The Wanderer crest gives Hornet a very Hollow Knight-like moveset that enables her to attack much faster at the expense of melee range. I didn't like this one at first because I just had a feeling that sticking with the game's main downstrike would have benefited me a lot more than just using a crest with a Hollow Knight pogo on it. And then I found the downstrike on the Witch crest, which is just Wanderer's downstrike with better range. But there's an interesting quirk to this one involving critical strikes and a small critical chance tied to needle hits when your bind is available, dealing 3 times its normal damage. It's a really cool and unique passive effect, but it's hard to build around since no other tool in the game's entire lineup really facilitates it, so it just ends up feeling like a random quirk. I even tried throwing on the dice because its description mentioned luck, and I still noticed little to no difference, so if anyone has any data on this, then feel free to share it. I now have data, and I can confirm that the dice actually does have an influence on the crit rate on the Wanderer crest. Yeah, you want to know how much it does? It increases the crit chance by 0.2%. The charged attack is also one of the more unique actions since it's a 5-hit stab, and the amount of attacks you're throwing out feeds into the Wanderer's passive involving critical damage, since you're doing rapid attacks in a single action, meaning Pin Badge and Longclaw can find permanent residence here. It's also one of the better charged attacks damage-wise since a +0 needle delivers 15 damage in total, barring any defense modifiers, making it the hardest hitting charged attack of any of the 4 early game crests. This damage gap here might seem inconsequential heal, but a lot of the game's early enemies have exactly 15 HP and no defense modifiers, making the Wanderer's charged attack a one-shot when you land all 5 stabs. With a fully upgraded needle, the damage discrepancy actually gets very noticeable between these options, and these numbers are still assuming none of the attacks in the action end up being a crit. The only charged attack that outdamages this one is the Architect, and you're not snagging that bitch until you're knee-deep into Act 2, so you're gonna have to wait a while on that one. The Beast Crest takes a lot of getting used to if you're using downstrikes for platforming and combat a lot. That's not saying the crest is bad, but it's definitely, it's uncomfortable. The idea here is to bind and then just use Flea Brew and Flint Slate to spank as much ass as the buff window allows, face tanking whatever does damage to you because you'll just heal it back anyways. The running attack chains very comfortably into a basic attack, making for quick successive hits to restore 2 HP off of an enemy extremely quickly, and binding seems to increase nail damage by 25%. Taking your level 5 needle from 21 to 26. Not that this isn't useful on top of the heal on attack buff it also gives you, but it only lasts 5 seconds, and only a max of 3 HP can be healed during the window. This makes sense balance-wise when you consider that the bind only heals 3 HP as a base anyways, but a 5-second attack buff versus the Reaper's 10 I think is the main reason why the Fury bind feels so difficult to capitalize on. There is another drawback build-wise that I'm really not a fan of, which is that the Crest not only comes with just 4 tool sockets, but you don't get any space for blue tools, at least until you get the Vesti Crest from Eva. Blue tools offer some of the most important support utilities in the game, and having only one of these available at most is incredibly limiting. The quicker heal and extra damage during Fury mode seems like an okay trade-off, but there's honestly a huge list of blues that work very well with this Crest, and only being able to equip one at max just feels like somebody turning off the fun switch. The Injector Band, for example, can be stacked on top of the beast's innately quicker bind animation, making the bind, and any effects you would have had attached to it, pretty much instant. Longclaw and Pin Badge are both good because of their direct enhancements to needle attacks. The 2 claw mirror tools can also work if you want to take advantage of the quicker bind animation. Multi-binder raises its healing window, Reserve Bind basically gives you a free Fury proc without Silk. Like, there are so many fun combinations we could have messed around with. I go back and forth between the Witch and the Architect being my 2 favorites, and even now I still might prefer the Witch a little more because its socket space allows for up to 3 blues. 4 if you have the expanded Vesti Crest, which is, honestly, like that's stupid. Like, that's pretty stupid. This makes it a comfort pick in just about any situation because there's a very particular build that I like using that fits the theme of the Crest itself while also handing out unforgivable amounts of damage. I mean, like multiple hundreds of damage in a single burst. So the Witch Crest has a unique bind effect that damages enemies around you for 3 times your basic attack damage, which also scales with needle damage. So if you hit for 13 damage, the branches are gonna do 39. The only downside is that it cannot heal by itself and will need enemies nearby to siphon from. You will panic heal at 2 HP when you have this on, and you will Alt F4 the game afterwards. It's just a thing that, it's just muscle past the growing pains. It's a thing that happens. This shit's goated, I promise. Since this Crest offers 3 blues, you can take advantage of one of the game's most insane synergies with multi-binder and claw mirrors, and with the additional help of Injector Band as your 3rd, it won't even matter what you have on the Vesti Crest because whatever you're trying to kill is probably already dead. You've also got Reserve Bind for the backup heal, Warding Bell for the extra protection when you're under fire, and I guess Longclaw in case it's just too good for you to ignore. The downstrike is very similar to just Wonder Crest with longer reach, but the charged attack on the Witch Crest is also the strongest of the 7. If every single hit in the charged attack hits the same target, it will do over 100 damage, but it's actually kind of hard to do this, which is why I still feel like the Pin Badge is one of the weaker choices for this one. Like, I get that it's supposed to be good in crowds, but you're already playing as the CEO of zoning with the build I threw up earlier, and that 4th blue could just as easily go towards Warding Bell or Reserve Bind or something else that just ends up fitting the build better. Like, you want to feed as much into that bind as possible. I just feel like that's the only way to play this Crest. It's twice as quick as a normal bind that can be sped up even more with Injector Band, does its own scalable damage, and comes with a whole shopping list of blue tools that proc on heal. Ejector, mirrors, butt plug. There you go. Now go have fun one-tapping deities. Before I decided this wasn't a ranking video, this was ranked number 1, by the way. The most obvious benefit of running an Architect build is the allowance of 3 red slots, lending itself very comfortably to minion and bullet hell builds. Cogflies, curve sickles, pins, shards, volt vessels, just fucking pick your favorites, honestly. The main drawback of the Crest is that it has no room for silk skills, which I don't personally find to be a problem because I'm usually only using silk specifically for healing purposes because I think the new tool system is both incredibly fun and strong as hell. The Crest also gives you room for 2 blues and yellows, at which point you should just snap pick the pouch in the satchel. I like using the quick sling here so you can toss out 2 throwables at once, and having the reserve bind on the Vesta Crest as a tactical reload button for all your reds. But once again, the yellows don't really give you much to choose from in a combat situation, so I would just slap on the dice and the belt and call it a day. But there's a second hidden build option that I think gets slept on due to the Crest kind of steering its users in the direction of bullet hell builds, and that's a build I've been calling the Drill. Running and down strike attacks can both be charged. Barring any potential defense modifiers, the running and down strike attacks each do the same damage when all 4 attacks land, resulting in 42 total damage, which is exactly twice that of a basic needle hit from any other Crest. The basic needle attack also technically has a higher damage ceiling than other Crests on paper, but only if all the smaller attacks also hit, and the additional hitboxes are really small and hard to get to land consistently, so getting full damage out of every single attack is kind of not really good advice in practice. It's a lot easier to use the charged running and downstrike attacks, but with the basic attacks you need to be within like headbutt range, like close enough to see tooth decay on half of these motherfuckers. The charged attack is also fucking nuts and outputs the highest damage of all 7 Crests when all the attacks hit, plus the style points of assaulting your foes with a 2000 watt industrial beam driver. And this is where it's time for me to bring out the chalkboard because Professor Rusty says it's time for some motherfucking math. Since we're talking about damage values of melee attacks, it's now time to bring out one of my favorite red tools in the game on any build, the Flint Slate. Flint Slate seems to work very inconsistently with Architect because of how many hits you're handing out with a single action. Flint Slate will boost nail damage by 50% rounding up, so 5 goes to 8, 9 goes to 14, so on and so forth. When using Flint Slate on the Architect Crest, basic attack damage will top out at 35, and charged running and downstrike attacks top out at 52, which is not 50%. Like, these attacks measure in at 42 normally. Like, this isn't even close to 50%. This happens because Flint Slate only buffs the first hit on the Architect's charged running attack and the charged downstrike attack, resulting in the bonus from Flint Slate being noticeably weaker on these 2 specific actions. This does not happen on the Architect's Needle Strike, the charged basic attack, the actual charged attack, like the one the Pinstress gives you. Talking about this Crest is so confusing. Instead, Flint Slate not only gives its bonus to all 7 attacks in the action, but it's way more than 50%, taking each hit from 13 to 23. You can one-tap a Grand Read enemy with this marvel of industrial science and still have like 1 or 2 hits left in the action. There are a couple perks with this one, and a couple not so good things that I want to complain about. So, the Shaman Crest increases all silk skill damage by 1/2 of a needle hit, which is massive for any of the 6 skills, but especially powerful on multi-hitters like Threadstorm and Rune Rage. Threadstorm seems to be the main beneficiary of this buff since the following 6 extended hits also get boosted by the Shaman Crest, resulting in the single highest damage attack in the game Hornet will ever gain access to. Like, I'm not kidding, this thing is bullshit. It's a tremendous help for all the skills, and it also dedicates 3 spaces to silk skills, but with only 2 blue sockets available for tools. Now, this crest already gives you the hidden easy mode with the innate 0.5x boost, so this isn't the worst setup. If I could have landed on any of the 3, I'm glad it landed on blue. But this is also the smallest socket amount found on any of the 7 crests, and I don't feel like I can create a focused build around anything with this much space. It feels like I'm using tools for peripheral buffs instead of actually using them to feed into an idea for a fun build. The Volt Filament is pretty much mandatory here, just because it's the only blue tool in the game that gives you a straightforward damage bonus to your skills, and casting it in water gives everything in the scene an epileptic seizure, so why wouldn't you have it on? And from there, I would just dedicate the remaining 2 blues to something involving silk management, like Druid's Eyes and Weave Light. If you have all 3 silk hearts plus Weave Light, you can just guarantee yourself 4 notches of silk by doing absolutely absolutely nothing, which is exactly enough silk you need to cast one skill. That's honestly the only approach I can think of for building around the Shaman that feels even vaguely organized. I have now made a tactical shift to bitch stance, because I'm about to bitch a little. There aren't nearly enough blue tools in the game that facilitate silk-based builds. Why does the Agaflialia only decrease silk cost of skills when you're at full HP? Like, why can't it just be full-on Spell Twister? Having it only activate at full HP directly conflicts with the function of Druid's Eyes, which restores silk when taking damage. There's no Soul Eater equivalent, the Needlein doesn't act as a Dream Wielder equivalent, at least to my knowledge, and two of the best blue tools that immediately come to mind when building around it are functionally incompatible with each other. The damage bonus is extremely powerful, and you absolutely feel that improvement in big boss battles. I just wish it came with a bit more customizability. That would make me happier personally. I also cannot think of a single yellow that matches this crest, so I just throw on the dice and call it done. There you go. Expectedly, since the crest comes with its own skill boost, most of everything feels slightly weaker as a trade-off. The charged attack is only twice as strong as a basic attack, where the usual multiplier is 2.5, or at least around 2.5, but the moveset is themed around shooting magic arcs with your attacks, a la Grubberfly Elegy, and the range of the hits really helps out with downstrikes when you're just platforming. When comparing all the animations frame by frame, I actually noticed the bind animation was slightly slower than all the others, and will even be extended based on the amount of time it takes for Hornet to reach the ground when activated in the air. This can be pretty decent when playing around flyers, because if you're anticipating an attack, you can just use the bind as a kind of dodge and use the descent to limbo under the attack and heal that way. You just have to be careful doing this because the bind does have a height limit, and I don't know the exact height amount, but drop down too far and the bind will cancel out and you won't be getting the silk back, so try not to aura farm too hard or anything.